Want to get
Right?
started? Okay, sounds good.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I am your host, Jennifer Vasquez. I run a blog site called Vamp Jen's Corner at jenvasquez.com. And I cover dark art and other macabre topics. And I also recently had the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Shane not too long ago. And he's kind of the reason we're here today to
Kind of.
discuss. Yeah, you're kind of the reason we're here today to discuss vulnerabilities, which is connected to his new series of artwork that he just debuted at the Dark Art Emporium this past weekend, titled "The Kind of Love That Doesn't Die." So, before we continue, if you want to kind of talk about the connection of the new series to the
Yeah.
vulnerability submissions.
Um, yeah. So let me just first, I'll talk about the series itself. For those of you who did not make it to the opening, you can actually go on the Dark Art Emporium's Facebook page and look at the videos, and it's there, so you can actually watch that. But I explain it in there briefly, but right now it gives me the opportunity to discuss it a little bit more in detail. But basically, I mean, the simple reason, the real simple reason I even wanted to touch upon these subjects and everything and title the show what I wanted to title it, The Kind of Love That Doesn't Die. The simple, silly reason is because it was opening on Valentine's Day weekend. So when I found that out, I thought it was like the best opportunity for me to talk about love. And I kind of think it's funny with dark art. We don't, y- there's a lot of people who don't talk about love at all, and a lot of dark art has these monsters in it and creatures and all sorts of different things. But for me, for the approaching the series, those monsters and those creatures are some of these topics that I'm touching upon, which are like trauma and grief and loss. And so I kind of approach it in a different way because all of my artwork involves humans, and the human experience. So how my challenge was to tie that all into this entire series about love and to essentially the final result that I'm always hoping for is some kind of healing. And when I was talking about love in general, what I really think about a lot when it comes to love is connection. And through building connection with people, I've realized how important vulnerability is and to that connection. And so we were just talking about it beforehand, but we were talking about Brene Brown. I can't talk about vulnerability and not talk about Brene Brown because she is basically, she's a shame researcher, and she has studied vulnerability in all different forms, and she talks about connection and things. So that was a huge inspiration for this entire exercise. So I wanted to make sure that I brought up Brene Brown. I did write to her. I told her about this. I tried to get her to share it. Crickets. I kept tagging her on things. Um, so for like, I thought it was like it would have been a good opportunity for her to just say, hey, this cool thing in exercise in vulnerability is happening in the world right now. So maybe in the future I'll meet her or something and I'll let her know. But so yeah, so basically when we put this out, when we made this public that we were looking for people's vulnerabilities, um, I kind of knew that there was going to be a lot of common themes. So out of the 27 vulnerabilities that were submitted, we could actually summarize all of them into the following themes: resentment, art related, um, health, being hard on yourself or self love, relationships, trauma and abuse, fear and shame, and belonging and worthiness. All of those fit within there. And I would say shame is almost like that's kind of like the very topical emotion that's
Overarching.
happening. Yeah, overarching theme over everything, because just the idea of vulnerability itself uh, triggers a lot of that shame. You know, the fact that it is a vulnerability is probably because some part of you feels some kind of shame surrounding these themes that you might have a hard time telling like important people in your lives. So I found it interesting, and I knew that this part was going to be interesting for me because you know, I didn't want to like compartmentalize everybody's vulnerabilities, but I did want to show that there are common themes between a lot of people's vulnerabilities, these things that we all kind of go through. And so through this series of artwork, I was specifically relating it all to um, mostly romantic connection, you know, but I want to say that we're not only going to be talking about romantic connection today, you know, because I do also think it's important to talk about not just romantic connection, but platonic and friendships and things like that, these connections you have with people throughout your life. So I think that's important to note here, is that it is not just romantic that we're talking about. And I also do want to say that while we don't have time to unpack every single 27 of these vulnerabilities, we have read all of them and we have
Hmm.
thought about all
Yeah.
of them. I have read them and reread them. I am just absolutely floored by the things that people have submitted. And if you guys have not seen them, you can go onto my website. They're going to live there. It's ShaneIsakowski.com. There's a tab up at the top that says vulnerabilities, and they will live there. So I just want to make sure that everybody who submitted, like, we see you, we hear you,
Hmm.
and that they are going to live on the website for you to refer back to when in the future, when you want to see how far you've come. So
We appreciate every single submission. I mean, they were really just heartfelt. So we appreciate the people
yeah,
that submitted.
just yeah, I mean, you'll hear the ones that we picked. There aren't any that are more important than other ones. It's just these are the ones that kind of spoke to us the most, and specifically to me, you know, things that I could relate to, you know. And if I can't relate to them, I have some notes about the things that I can't exactly speak about, you know, in my current situation, but that doesn't mean that we didn't want to talk about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get into it, do you want to just preface that the things we're going to talk about in the opinions, they're not to be substituted for professional or medical advice.
We're not doctors.
Yeah, we're not doctors, so please, we don't want anyone suing us.
Yeah.
So this is all just, just to kind of discuss and kind of just, share our personal feelings and thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. So should we dig into the first one?
Let's dig in. You guys ready?
All right.
Everybody ready? Perfect. All right.
Okay. So first one up. The first and oldest one is that I have a major trust issue in my art. It's called Imposter Syndrome. And it feels like I'm not a real artist. My art is not good. And someday someone will see that and reveal the trickery to everyone. It's a really strange process, difficult to explain, especially when it concerns art. I know where it comes from an old IQ test with a really good result. But since I kept failing my grades in math, physics, and chemistry, I started to think that someone made a mistake. And this IQ test was a fraud. So I was a fraud too. But I don't know how to work through it. Most of the time, it's not a major issue. But sometimes something triggers this reaction, and my mind keeps telling me, you're not that good. You have luck for the moment, but one day this luck will leave you. You're not an artist. You just want to be one. It's my major cause of art block. So I know with
Whoa.
this one, Shane, you had like a strong reaction to it because I know you had a podcast
Uh,
episode on imposter syndrome. And
mhm.
so I'm going to let you kind of say your piece first, and then I'll add kind of.
Yeah. Uh, so who else feels triggered right now? Me. Um,
I think everyone's
we're
raising
in
their
a
hand.
room full of artists here. I wanted to make sure that we started with this one, and that we talked about this one because this is one of the number one things I hear from artists. And I have a lot of friends that are artists. I have the podcast. I talk to people about themes and topics to talk about. I really do actually want to do a follow-up episode of the Imposter Syndrome episode because it's been a while since I've talked about it. So look out for that in the future. But, you know, as far as creative shame triggers go, we all have them from something. You know, even if we were supported as a child from our parents and encouraged to keep creating artwork, there's some story or something, some teacher that ripped something out of your hands and ripped it up in front of everybody and told you not to paint a devil or something. This is my own story, by the way. But we all have these things, and sometimes those shame triggers make us second guess what we do. You know, even as confident adults, we still have these things where we're like, am I not good enough? Especially when you're getting to know other artists in the world and you're seeing what everybody's doing. And a lot of it has to do with when you are comparing yourself to other artists, you know? But in addition to second guessing those things about our artwork, sometimes those shame triggers actually help motivate us. And that's the part that like we have to kind of concentrate on. And the way that this person feels about you're not an artist, you just want to be one, it's important to note because that's all determined by what your definition of being an artist is. So I personally feel like being a professional artist is kind of like a byproduct of having a creative mindset and lifestyle to be able to continue sustaining it, you know, to live in this world and be an artist, being a working artist, making money doing it so you can continue doing it. But that doesn't mean that you're not an artist if you're not making money doing it. So a lot of people, when I talk to them and I ask them if they're an art, a lot of times I ask people when I first meet them if they're an artist, and they're like, I mean, I don't do it professionally, or they have like a million different ways of stating why they're not an artist, you know. But I just want to say that you don't have to be a professional artist making money to be an artist. And I personally feel like you are an artist if you say you're an artist. And uh, making money professionally as an artist and being successful as a professional artist has absolutely no bearing on whether or not you are an actual creative being, which I would say all of us are, you know. And a lot of those feelings of not being worthy of being an artist has so much to do with like the societal and professional recognition of being an artist. And a lot of it also has to do with living up to the standards of the artist that you admire. So, I mean, I hope that helps some of you guys.
Yeah, that totally, not to cut you off
Yeah,
if you
no, it's
weren't
okay.
done, but what you just said, you took the words out of my mouth because when I read it, and I wish I remembered the interview that that I read a few years ago, but it was an author. I want to say it was Stephen King, but don't quote me. But he had said something along the lines of, if you know, to addressing writers, that if you are dedicated to your craft and you're working hard on it, stop calling yourself an aspiring writer. You are a writer.
Right.
And he felt like the aspiring part was the limitation of someone considering themselves a writer or not. And so it was
Yeah.
after I read that, I was like, no, yeah,
It's
you know,
almost
I'm a
like
writer.
you have like a foot out the door where you're like, in case somebody calls you out and says, "No, you're not a writer. You haven't had anything published, or you haven't, you
Exactly.
know," then you could be like, "Oh, I'm not actually. I just said I was
Right.
an
You don't have a New
aspiring
York
writer."
bestseller. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the same thing how you were saying, you know, well, when do you consider yourself an artist, as far as like, you know, when you sell your first painting, when you have your first show at a gallery, like who is it for anyone to determine, as long as you see yourself as that? Like I think for me personally, I think we have to kind of already see ourselves as that which we want to become, you know,
Yeah.
to move toward it. And, you know, I think that with the whole imposter syndrome, you
Yeah.
know, it's all tied to that holds us
And
back.
and also you know, being that I talk to so many artists from so many different backgrounds, um, everybody has different life circumstances to be able
Hmm.
to do or not do what they do, you know? And like I feel like I've like forced my life circumstances. I'm just kind of like I'm just going to keep doing it, you know, no matter what, even if I'm broke all the time. But I'm trying not to do that, by the way. Um, but uh but everybody has different circumstances. People have families that they have to take care of and things like that. So making the choice to be a professional artist to continue doing the art might be a really really difficult choice for some people, you know. So so I yeah, so basically wherever you're at and you're making artwork, you can consider yourself an artist, and you that also means that
In
there's
any
nothing
form.
else that comes with that. That doesn't mean that you have to live up to any standard. It doesn't mean that you have to be giving an artist talk or anything like that. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that if you're creating artwork, living some kind of creative lifestyle and enjoying that, then it's okay to call yourself an artist.
Yeah, we are all artists here.
Hmm. Okay,
All right,
moving
should we
on
move on to the
to
next one?
resentment themes.
All right, here we go. Um, I truly do love the person that I am with, to the point that imagining life without them feels foreign and uncomfortable, while at the same time, I crave the freedom of solitude without ties. I want to belong to only me again. I am willing to break everything and be reborn. Will some form of our love survive transformation? If nothing changes, both life and our relationship will wither as my yearning rots to vindictiveness. That
Whoa.
last line. Yeah, that last line. I mean, me too, like having my like just loving literature. I was like, oh, that last line really got me.
Yeah. Um, so the artwork that is most related to this, if you log on to darkartemporium.com, you can see this, my entire collection of new art. So you can see these two pieces. But the two pieces that work the most, that speak the most to this, are Myth of the Soulmate and It's Not Your Job to Fix Me. And
Was a great piece, by the way.
thank you. Um, so so much of what we're talking about today is speaking about self-love and self-work, trying to figure out how to navigate through this world and just being okay with ourselves. And so much of that is about not putting the pressure on our relationships to be our everything. And a lot of that pressure is because society, again, tells us there's this overarching idea of what society keeps telling us what to do. And I think about this a lot. Um, Society tells us that having a soulmate is a thing. And if you found the one and you have problems in your relationship, then it's just not meant to be. Or or you know, basically your entire world comes crashing down. When in reality, in my experience, I've had multiple soulmates throughout my life. And I've also had um what I would consider soul family, you know, people who are not romantic partners, that I feel extremely connected to, you know, and some have come and gone. And I believe when you come to some of these life circumstances and transitions, those are the times that you can reflect upon what your current situation is and whether figure out whether or not it's serving you anymore. And this is why you feel like you grow apart from your romantic partner so often. You hear about this where, you know, people, you ask somebody who just went through a breakup, you ask them what happened, and a lot of them will say, like, we just kind of grew apart. You know, you grow in different directions. And this is why setting up a foundation at the beginning, working through problems and setting up this foundation at the beginning and being on the same team from the beginning is so important. Um, but also, I will say too that the only solution to the problem might be to separate, you know, and also that doesn't have to be the worst thing that's ever happened to you. You know, this has been, I've gone through separations where it is, I felt like at the time this was the worst thing that ever happened to me, you know. And then and it's just like a waterfall of events that happen. You break up, then you have living problems and money problems and all these different things. And it's hard not to feel like that is the worst thing that's ever happened. But
Mhm.
you know, when you've done a lot of this work on yourself and thinking about, you know, how to be okay with loving yourself, um it it's not as life shattering when those things happen, because you can rely on yourself.
Right.
Mm.
Well, I think too, I think that, the statement that I shared with you the other day about people come into your life for a reason or a season or a lifetime. And, you can really, love the person you're with, and they brought something to you, or, helped you ultimately grow in some way, even if, things don't last and you two, go in different directions for self-growth.
Right.
And I think that for me too, another thing that this made me think of is, because they're saying that they love the person that they're with, but they crave the freedom of solitude. And it had me thinking of, I think when couples are together for a long time, you most likely spend a lot of time together. And, I think that, there comes a point sometimes, and it's inevitable in a relationship, where one partner or maybe both kind of feel like have this moment where you feel like you've lost a sense of identity, because you're two people who are kind of sharing one existence. And
Yeah.
for some people, they kind of wake up one day and are like, where, they kind of feel like they lost themselves somewhere in a relationship. I think of if there are things that maybe you felt comfortable doing by yourself when you were single, but then you're in a relationship for a while, and then suddenly you're
Right.
like, I don't feel comfortable going to the store, or
Mhm.
things like that. And I think that this person really needing this kind of like needing to find a sense of self identity, but then they're willing to risk whether or not the relationship survives it.
Yeah.
But it's that need to kind of like get back to your center.
Well, that
Yeah.
shows the importance of finding, you know, that sense of identity. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's so important. And what you're talking about is codependence, you know, and I've had codependent tendencies throughout my life. And I've had to kind of work through that and figure out how to just be an individual. Like, I've always felt like I've had a strong sense of like who I am,
Mm-hmm.
but when you are in a relationship, especially like a monogamous relationship, and you see that person every single day and you live with them, you've been building your life with them, it's really easy to become just this one blob of a person. You are
You start
those two
mirroring each
people
other.
as one. Yeah, it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy to do that. But I really do think it is, like you're saying, important to find that sense of self, and identity as a person. And also, when you're in a relationship with somebody like that, if you guys have mutual respect, then they should be able to respect the fact that you do want to have that self identity and you want to have your own things and your own interests and your own friends. And that's totally okay. And a lot of people find that as like a threat to your relationship, you know, if you're not doing everything together.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I can say that it's not, you know, and it's also very important to find that sense of self.
Yeah. Well, the respect for, for self growth is important, because it's like if you're not happy with yourself, how can you be happy with another individual? So
Yeah.
self growth is important.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
that
Should we
was
move on to
great.
the
Yeah,
next
let's move on.
one?
Thank you for the
All right.
comments, guys. Um,
Okay.
Shane's gonna make me cry. That was beautiful. I'm not sure at which point
Aw.
that was, but thank you. And this is why many polyamorous relationships can, in fact, be stronger. We're going to talk about that as well.
Oh, that's right.
Mhm.
Okay. Let me go on to the next one. Okay. It's number 10, right? Just to make sure I'm
Number
on track.
10. Yeah,
Okay.
relationships.
Got it. My greatest strength is also my greatest weakness. When I love far too hard, without limits, without conditions, without thinking. A fierce love I protect and coddle and coo. but loving like this means more hurt than I've ever felt. I don't love often, but when I do, oh boy, and I fear I will never feel that same love in return.
Ah,
Very,
oh my
very
gosh.
strong, very
I mean, this, I could have
attached love.
submitted this one. This could have been me. So,
You don't have to
uh,
say it's anonymous.
yeah. I feel this so hard for sure. And people who know me know this about me as well. Um, as far as loving too much or in general being too much, the way that I've dealt with this in my own life is to practice ethical non-monogamy, specifically polyamory. And the reason I've educated myself in this is because I felt like I put too much pressure on one partner and was way too much for one person. I don't know how many of you feel that way, but and part of this was probably because I just didn't know how to cope with being so much, and so there's a possibility I could have salvaged some of these previous relationships by simply learning how to deal with that on my own. But um, this isn't the only way that you can combat some of these feelings, but for me, it works. And also, I think a lot of these feelings stem from your attachment style, which is something I've been speaking to a few people, some people on this call about. And it's this person, whoever wrote this, probably has the exact same attachment style as I do, which is anxious, ambivalent with a lean towards secure attachment. And what that means is all you want from your partner is love while keeping them close because you don't want to lose them. And you pretty much try everything to keep them so they don't abandon you. And you crave security and reassurance. And that is like me to a T. And the thing is when you start looking into these attachment styles, you you're like, okay, well, that describes me, but now what? What do you do with this information? Just acknowledging it is the first step. Just knowing that that's how you are is important, because some of the other attachment styles are avoidant. So when you have an anxious, ambivalent attachment style with an avoidant attachment style, you have one person pushing, the other one pulling away. And so you might want to think about that when you get into a relationship and you see how each of you are, how if you are the anxious, ambivalent person trying to make them love you, and the other person is completely avoidant and not wanting to feel that all the time, you might want to reconsider maybe being with that person or talking to them about it, and trying to work through that and try to figure out how to make it work if you really do have strong feelings for them. So this is something I think about a lot. I don't want to say that I'm necessarily always the best at, I mean, let's face it, like attraction, you, in so many ways, you cannot control it. So sometimes you fall in love with the wrong person,
It
you
happens.
know? And this has happened to me. And so some of the, some of the artwork, uh, deals with a lot of this stuff, and I mean, you can kind of draw your own conclusions from looking at the artwork and reading the titles of my art for this series. And, I also want to say during the opening, I had said this, but um, the titles for every single piece of artwork for this series were things that I collected over the last year or so from my own experiences and from things people said, some really hurtful things, things I said to myself. And then I created the entire series around those statements. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of them kind of dealt with this being too much. And that is something that I've talked about before in my artwork. There's a piece of artwork called The Sound of Surrender, where the model was a writer and she wrote this poem, and the middle of the poem said too much and not enough. And that's something that just kind of spoke to my soul, because um, it's all these different conflicting feelings of being way too much for somebody, but then also not being enough in relationships that failed, so it's like this weird dichotomy of trying, this weird balance of trying to uh not be too much for somebody while keeping them, happy and not smothered.
So when you say too much, like you mean just kind of like too much emotionally, like needing their attention all the time, like,
Right.
like
Yeah.
physical affection, like you like to like visibly
Everything.
see.
Right.
Oh, okay, okay.
I
Have you
mean,
seen that?
everything. Yeah. And it's like the other person, you have to realize, has their own life,
Mm-hmm,
and when you are suddenly dropped into their life as a person, as an important person,
mm-hmm,
you have to respect the fact that they do have their own life. And all of a sudden you're like this puppy dog that wants to like show up at their door and cuddle and whatever, and
mm-hmm.
it's like, they don't always have the spoons for that. They might not always have the space to give you that. um, and so as an anxious, ambivalent person, um, I try really hard not to take that personally, but it's hard not to sometimes, when
Mm-hmm.
you're just like, hey, I'm showing up for you. How come you're not showing up for me? You know? So that ends up being like too much for a lot of people. So I've had to kind of learn how to curb that a little bit.
You recognize it. See,
Mhm.
it's interesting because I had approached this from a different perspective because I am the opposite as far as where I am not emotional. Where if you look at me, you would think I'm just like a statue,
Mm,
but emotionally, like learning more about like my introversion, and then over the past year learning that I'm a highly sensitive person, I learned that I process emotions deeply. And in the past, before understanding these things about myself, I shut a lot of connections and building relationships out because of the fact that when I open those doors and start to care for someone, it you know it's hard to not be affected by the things that happen to them, or it would cause me stress.
mhm.
And I kind of see it from the perspective of you know it's scary to love and kind of get your emotions attached with another person, when you care so deeply and you open yourself. So where I'm the opposite, where I try to kind of like shut off the attachment part because of the way I
Right.
process emotions. And
Do
it was
you,
huh
I was going to ask you, do people consider you to be emotionally unavailable?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I,
Okay.
I think so. I think if you were to ask my husband, he would probably say, yeah. Okay, so actually, to put it, I was listening to this song the other day, and there was a lyric that stuck out, and it said, it was something along the lines of, "I love slow but deep," and that
Mm,
is totally me to a T because it takes a lot for me to build a connection with someone and then to kind of build that care and love. But when I do, I'm invested and I care about you. Like
right.
what happens to you, like I'm in it. And if it hurts you, it's going to hurt me too.
Yeah.
But it's scary. And I think that's another reason why my social circle is so small, because it's hard to open yourself up to a lot of people and
Right.
feel that strongly
And
about everyone.
introverted people as well, when you're
Yeah.
around, I'm not an introverted person at all. In fact, I'm like 87% extroverted. So I get charged up talking to people,
Yeah.
where introverted people generally, they have like this, their energy gets depleted the longer they're giving to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think it's interesting to think about the differences there,
Mm-hmm.
and you being an introverted person, but also like being introverted does not mean that you lack empathy. Like obviously,
Oh,
like you're
exactly.
saying,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like you have a lot of empathy, and when
Mm-hmm.
people that you love are hurt, you're also hurt too. And
Exactly.
so I think that's important to note too.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the
Okay.
next one. All right.
Yeah.
I think the next one is oh, this is
Oh, okay.
the really
It's
meaty one,
starting
I think,
to,
right?
yeah, it's getting a little heavy here. I just want to
Okay.
say also, real quick, I don't think we mentioned it at the beginning, but we are going to open up for questions and discussion at the end. And yeah, so we'll do that. We have 2 more to go through, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
All right. Regrets from chances not taken, the one that slipped away. Misplaced decisions haunt me, leaving cruel scars. Feeling more afraid of the night, of making the same venomous mistakes, struggling through the pain and chaos of clustered emotions. Denying self-renovation, denying the future. The avalanche of thoughts that threaten to undress the past. The nights, the flashbacks of memories, still linger and tug at my throbbing heart, silently crying as the pillow absorbs the salty tears. Staying where I am not wanted and not loved has debilitated me, sadly. I have tolerated it, accepted it was all I deserved or all I am worth. Wanting to be loved by someone who is selfish and incapable of love has left me depleted, lethargic, hopeless, and all I know is despair, when I would have loved him forever with every piece of me. An ominous depiction of love leaves me dangling and leaves with nothing but denial that true, insatiable love exists, love that lasts forever. Being a single mom has its rewards, but it is an incredibly challenging daily task and lonely. It has made me fragile yet impermeable. Stress and fear encapsulate and consume me. My father's suicide, infidelity, and narcissism from the first 2 marriages, the unwillingness to commit from the most recent man I adored, they have been the catalyst to all of the disappointment that led to the self-loathing and have destroyed, robbed, blinded me to the beauty life could possess. I have become proficient at accepting the blame for every failed relationship. The unraveled mindset and fear have chiseled away at my joy. Can you say trust issues? I am so ready to be unafraid, fierce, and to reconcile with myself, to grant myself the same permission and grace I allow complete strangers to capitalize on. Whom I used to be, the woman who was able to find peace, tranquility, and balance through writing, reading, yoga, dance, and running. I am ready for the cathartic rebuilding and reprogramming of my thought processes. It is mystifying and unfortunate how brokenness can produce scraps of yourself, make you feel dead, make you feel most vulnerable, almost bare naked, barely visible, aimlessly navigating life. Grief is confusing and ruthless, always starving and gnawing for attention, so powerful and tempting, allowing failure to crawl in. Always in my face, on my shoulder, another mistake, because that is what life has been. Games, disappointments, rejections, betrayals, abandonments. Writing your own death to love eulogy is not that intriguing or rewarding, especially when there is life left to live. I do not like this ending. So, goodbye fear, goodbye grief, goodbye disappointment. You all may have been my only faithful commitments, but one day I will embrace love again, magically, more deeply, more prepared, mesmerized with purpose, power, and beauty. So go fuck yourself. You don't get to cut me anymore and take up space in my mind and heart. Man, this one was just so beautifully written, but just so uncensored and raw.
I
There's a lot.
I am floored by this one. And
Yeah.
this one starts poetically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very much. And I mean, I read through this one, I don't even know how many times. And what I realized through reading through it was that just the way that this is written kind of outlines in a lot of ways. It's very similar to the stages of grief, you know, and loss. And so like, you know, there's a lot of pain and things and anger throughout it. But then there's kind of like an upward sort of turn, and there's like some humor in there.
Yeah.
And then there's this kind of acceptance and hope and sort of empowerment to push forward. So I find that really interesting that this, I feel like this is very well written, you know, it was
You could
very
have
thought
had,
out.
yeah, you could have had Jeremy read this as
Oh,
your,
right.
when you had read the prelude to your exhibit on Saturday.
Yeah. And so, um,
But yeah, there's a ton. Well, one of the things that I had thought of was the whole philosophy of is it stoicism? But there's that quote. I wrote it down because I didn't want to get it wrong. But it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters.
Mm,
And I feel that at the last part, she's saying like goodbye fear, goodbye grief. Like she's, all of this just deep pain and suffering. Like she is choosing not to react to it a certain way anymore and to
yeah.
take that control back. And I think that it's so true. And I think it speaks to just, whatever you've been through it, what it comes down to is, it, the bad things that happen to you, it can really suck in, like, have people have
Mhm.
horrible things happen to them, but ultimately the only thing we have control over is what we're going to do about it.
Yeah.
And I think that just how she kind of traces that here, it's like you see her progression, and in the end, she's just like, I've had enough. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to let it overtake me.
And
It's
also,
really
I
endearing.
think if she would have ended it on just the death to love eulogy, um, that would have been okay too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think she's ending it with this empowered statement because it feels better to end on a positive note like that. But also, I think it's important to just know that it's okay to feel all of these feelings. Like this is obviously
Yeah.
somebody who's suffered a lot and also has had a lot of joy, being a single mom has its own rewards, and it can be challenging with daily tasks and lonely, but it's made her fragile yet impermeable. So it's like it's this theme of strength on top of this and
Mm-hmm.
empowerment. And so I think it's just really important to note that it's okay that even through all of these things, and the important thing to think about is like this is just one person's story. Each
Mm-hmm.
one of us has these multitudes of different things that have happened to us that creates this very fragile person sometimes, or a very empowered person, or a combination of both. And I feel like each one of us has the capacity for all these different things. And some of us are just beaten down more than others. And like you're saying, it's kind of like, what do you do with that? When you've had so much struggle throughout your life, how do you react to that? Do you come out of it and say, fuck you? Um, to those negative things that have happened in your life? Or do you just succumb to it and just say, my life sucks, everything blows, everything's terrible, And I've met a lot of people who feel like that, and I don't want to fault them for that, because that's the way that they're dealing with it, and maybe they just have not come to a place to cope with all of those feelings. And that's like okay, because it's a process. It's not something that's just going to happen overnight to get over
Mm-hmm.
these like really difficult things.
Yeah.
And this is just, again, this is one person's story, and we're stepped through all like this pile of things that have happened in their life. So if that person is watching right now, thank you for being
Yes.
vulnerable. I
Thank you.
mean, it's
Yeah.
like this is an incredible, this is the reason why, this is why we did this exercise, for people like this who maybe don't have anybody else to throw this onto, and just say, this is everything that sucks, this is why, this is how.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just incredible. So thank you for sharing that.
All right. So now I think we have the final ones up.
Yeah.
All right. I have been riddled with anxiety and PTSD from childhood traumas for over 20 years now. I was bullied relentlessly at every school I went to, still not sure why, and constantly screamed at and degraded at home. As an adult, people have only tried to use me to try and gain sex or take advantage of my skill as an artist. I feel unworthy of grief since it's always worse somewhere else. I had an abortion at 24 for many reasons, including that I couldn't bear bringing another life into this awful world and giving up my dreams simultaneously. The father didn't want it either, and I couldn't handle the emotional weight of motherhood, seeing as mine was so cruel. I would not have survived postpartum depression, and yet I feel such incredible sadness for the life lost, anyways. I have wanted to die so often, but I continue on for reasons I can't grasp. maybe spite, maybe hope, maybe fear of what lies after death. In any sense, I am here and I try desperately to find joy in every snippet, every crevice where light shines. I treasure it. I try so hard to be so kind since I know it can be scarce to some people. I feel so lucky to still be here, and I hope those suffering can find some solace in their fight, that they are still here to try. Oh, another one.
Uh, Another really heavy one. And
Yeah.
we're ending on this one for a number of reasons, but after I read this and reread it and reread it, I just can't help but feel like I have no real advice on this. And because so much of this is not my experience, I have not dealt with an abortion, and some of these things that this person has had to deal with. And um, I kind of feel like it would be speaking out of turn by offering any advice. Um, and what I can say about that, there's a few different tie-ins. There's a few tie-ins with my artwork in general with this series. It's not your job to fix me. And so like when any of these people are expressing the difficulties they've gone through, there was a time in my life when I tried to fix whenever anybody would come to me with a problem, with heavy problems or any kind of problems, really. I'm like, how could I fix it? What can I do? Here's my advice. Here's all the things I could do to fix it because I'm the dude. I could fix it. I'm a problem solver, and I've had to learn how to communicate in a different way because people's goals in their communication don't always overlap, especially in a close relationship. So there are different ways that you can communicate with people, which the first way is this is as the communicator or the person being communicated to. Um, the first one is just to have somebody to listen to what you have to say. The second one is to listen and then to support them or acknowledge what they have to say. And then the third one is to listen, seek acknowledgement, and then also offer advice. And not everybody wants that third one. And a lot of times they don't, and we as people who like want to solve problems all the time and somebody's telling you all of their hardships, you're like, well, why don't you just go get a therapist? Or why don't you get on depression medication and, all these things? And it's like, that is not that's probably what they've heard their entire life, is like how to fix this. You're broken. So let me fix it, but a lot of times some of these people, they just want to be heard. That's it. So you as the person trying to communicate, you can also train yourself to, it's not all on you, but train yourself to let people know what you need in that situation, and then as the person, when you start getting somebody who is telling you all these heavy things about them, like you can train yourself then also to ask them what they need, so this actually helps so much in direct communication in that way where it doesn't get all muddied and weird because like somebody's telling you all of these problems, and then you're like, well, let's fix it, or they're just like maybe not even listening, so it does help when you're trying to communicate some of these problems to somebody to let them know exactly what you need.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I think for me, because I'm such I try to turn things around and make them positive. And it was something that like my husband actually pointed out to me where he would just tell me, I'm telling you just to vent. He's like, you don't have to have a response or try to like make everything better. And it's something that I've kind of had to like learn that, if people just want to, if they want to just, say their piece, I don't have to feel as if, well, let me lift the mood. But it's,
Yeah.
sometimes they just have to speak their truth.
Yeah. And sometimes people just want to be heard or seen.
Mm-hmm.
And And again, that's what this entire exercise is about, is giving people a platform to be able to do that without the judgment part of it.
Yeah.
And if you guys, I don't know if you've read Amanda Palmer's The Art of Asking, but she has a quote in there. I think it's from somewhere else, but she references it. And the quote is, "Not everyone wants to be looked at, but everyone wants to be seen." And that
Mm.
like spoke to me so much, because I feel like a lot of people, part of my job as an artist is to see people in a different way, is to find stories and things and find parallels between our stories and try to make it make sense in the canon of my own work, but also just to see people, and something when I had taken two photography classes at like a local community college, and I remember the most powerful exercise that I had, one of the assignments was to photograph something ugly and make it look pretty. And that required a lot of seeing, things that other people might not see, and I just feel like as artists, we have that, we have it, we already have it, like recognizing things that are beautiful and putting them into our artwork is kind of what we do, so for me, so much of my process is about these people's stories and talking to them and having these conversations. And I always say that the final result, which is the painting or the piece of artwork, is just proof for me that the conversation even happened and that the moment and the connection actually happened. So a lot of the work that I've been doing with the models and the people that I'm portraying is about them, and we end up having these really deep, long conversations about their life. And then I kind of pull things from that, and I'm just like, we're not alone. All of us have like similar parallels and things that we all kind of go through. We might just go through it in different ways, but like I feel you, and and sometimes it's just having some kind of empathy for somebody in their situation. It's like I've done artwork about abortion and miscarriages. Obviously, I've never had an abortion or a miscarriage, but I can empathize with somebody going through that kind of emotional weight in their life, So so again, this entire exercise is about just recognizing these people and seeing you. There was even one of the vulnerabilities was even just, I'm going to read it real quick because it's a short one, but I just want to say it's one of the last ones that came in. And it says, "Speaking up and not being heard or taken seriously, be myself and been rejected or mocked for that, being generous and emphatic and getting the response of being taken advantage of for that instead of valued and appreciated." So I just wanted to bring that one up real quick, just to, because they're kind of like saying that they're not being heard
Mhm.
essentially, but I'm letting you know that we hear you. And that is one that I did want to bring up as well, just as just a side note here. But yeah.
I think that was, we went through the selection that we chose
Yeah.
to discuss for tonight. Should we get to some of the what's in the chat
Yeah, let's
questions?
there are chat things here.
Let's see. So powerful. Someone snap, snap, snap.
Fucking
Fucking
powerful.
powerful.
Women can be fixers too. I totally agree with that. Did I say that men are fixers? I'm sorry if that's what I generalized. Um, Stupid man brain of mine. Um, I do know, because I do know a lot of women have said that to me as well, is that they've gone through life and always had to be the problem solver, especially like in the household and things like that, and just trying to solve all the problems while the man goes and does, I don't know, the work or something stupid. So um yeah, most of the times we can't change the things that happen in our life, but we can always change the way we let them to affect us. Not an easy task at all, and endless but doable. Nice.
Yeah.
I'm a big problem solver too. I've gotten into the habit of asking someone before I respond, "Do you want my advice or do you just want to vent?" Perfect.
Yeah. That's what I need to start doing more of.
Yeah.
Do you want my
I
advice or
think
just want to?
we all do. I mean, I slip up even knowing this. So, why don't we open this up for discussion and questions? We have some time. So,
Yeah.
uh
anyone has
Let's
any
do it.
comments or questions
Yeah, if
about
you want
anything?
to, so there's a few different ways we could do this. Jennifer, we realize Jennifer does not have the same reaction emojis as I have.
Yeah,
So
I'm
if you
limited to the
have,
hand clap and thumbs up.
yeah, if you have a raise hand, you can hit your raise hand reaction. Or if you don't want to speak on camera here, you can just type it into the chat. That's totally fine too. Yeah.
Oh,
Anybody
Julie
else?
said this was an amazing talk. It has been so good for my soul.
Thank
That makes me
you.
feel good. I'm glad
Yeah.
that, yeah, like some of what we were able to say kind of
Yeah, for sure. Does anybody have
hit a note.
questions or comments? Anything? Anything you're dealing with that you are okay with not being anonymous? And maybe you want advice? Maybe you want us just to listen?
Yeah, exactly. You could turn
Mhm.
off your camera. Anyone? No.
I do.
Hmm.
Oh, yes.
Wendy.
Did that emoji because I've never seen them before. I didn't even know that was an option. Well, I was just thinking about something, an experience, because my dad just passed away recently, last month. And
Condolences.
thank you. And it's kind of ties into this thing about fixing things, and I know I made, a Facebook post about him, just send him good wishes. In the beginning, I didn't get specific, and just how the normal response, and this is a well-meaning response, and this is kind of, what is expected to a degree, but just, oh, I hope he gets better. I hope he recovers, blah, blah, blah. And as his cause of death is not specific, but he just had a lot of health issues that kind of wore down his body over time, and he ended up having some internal bleeding and having mini heart attacks and bone infections, and
Ooh.
this stuff had been going on for years, and it was never life-threatening, but I think just having that go on for years wears down your body and your spirit. And so I guess the thing that I came to realize was, after I made that post and after I talked to my dad, I realized that I don't think he wants to get better. Like, I think that he's tired of this, and that he wants to go for many reasons, and he's at peace with going. And, and I had to kind of re-examine my, desire at sometimes to
fix
yeah,
problems and come up with solutions.
and not even to do it myself, but to ask for that from others. And when sending good energy in a certain direction, that doesn't mean that you fix what you perceive as a problem, but maybe that you send good energy for the best possible outcome for all. And that's a better way of looking at it, rather than trying to fix. I mean, even, my boyfriend is in a wheelchair. One of my best friends is deaf. She just recently did an interview where she says she doesn't consider being deaf a disability, it's a lifestyle. Just all these things that us we're used to wanting to fix, that maybe don't need fixing.
Right.
Or looking at it from a different angle.
Yeah. And specifically, death is like such a
Taboo.
it's such a difficult thing, especially when somebody like essentially gives up or makes peace with the fact that they're going to die.
Yeah.
And it seems really unfair in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of other people in their life that's going to be dealing with their death well past when they're gone. So it's really
Their skin.
What's that?
Or not the ones in their skin.
Yeah. And we, just having that experience. And you also, like, me as an encouraging person who's just like, we can get through it, and I have all this hope and all great things and blah blah blah, sometimes that's not the answer either, especially for somebody who's just like, I'm tired,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so
And it's also a beautiful thing. I feel blessed that he knew he was going, he was at peace with going, and I was able to say goodbye, and he was able to have that conversation with most of the people that were really important to him.
yeah,
That's kind of awesome.
thank you for sharing that, Wendy.
Yeah. Thank you.
As you know, I just lost my father as well
That's
in
right.
September.
Yeah.
And I had a really difficult time with that because I couldn't really have a discussion with him since the beginning of like 2019.
Mm.
He could like hear me earlier last year, he could talk, but he was a little, he was different. It wasn't like I could just have a normal conversation with him. So we just have to kind of like be thankful that we do have certain moments with the people that end up leaving this life.
Yeah.
So,
Also, for
thank you.
the moments that people do have that chance, because I think in this, I often bring it back to that it's the society, but I think that because the culture doesn't really cultivate that
Dealing with
ritual around that time,
death,
Death positivity.
right?
that then people that are in that process often don't give themselves a chance to have that acceptance and
Yeah, because we're also not given like the tools to deal with some of those things, and just like to circle this back around to art, um, you know, dark art, like a lot of dark artists I know deal with death and deal with grief and loss and things like that. That's what I do in my work. And that's why I feel like dark art is important into, in our society overall, because we're talking about things people don't want to talk about because our society just wants to like, put people in nursing homes and
Yeah.
before they die and then just forget about them, and that's just really really terribly sad. So
Yeah, and I think Rhiannon, that you hit on a important thing too, with it being a culture thing. And I think that it's, I think the American mindset, we fear death, but looking at other cultures around the world, it's something to be celebrated. And because I'm Mexican American, and in Mexican culture, you have holidays like Dia de los Muertos, where it's seen as they don't, your loved ones really don't ever leave. They're just kind of on on this other side, of this realm that we can't see. And it's something, not feared, and it's more just accepted as a natural part of life. And I think that, it's something, other cultures that, kind of see the positive in death, we can learn a lot from.
yeah. Ashley says in the chat, there's an epic podcast with Duncan Trussell and Anne Lamott that discusses death. There's that last episode of the show, Midnight
gospel.
Gospel, that is
Yeah.
just,
Oh, I have to see that. I've heard
oh,
really good things about
it's
that.
amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'll have to see it.
And it's cool because it's a conversation between a mother and her son
Yeah.
actually having the conversation together.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or things you want to share? Mercedes, unmute yourself. You are muted.
I like to share, well, first also my condolences, Shane, about losing your dad.
Thank you.
And that brought actually the time I lost my own dad. He died in 1998. And I was very close to him. And the problem was that we had a discussion on Sunday. And then I went to my home, and then he died on Thursday. Next Thursday. So for me, it was very hard not saying, not even a proper goodbye, but just to have this, bitter last memory,
Yeah.
that we had the discussion and the goodbye was very sour, very bitter. And it's something that just what you mentioned about your dad reminds me that, and I appreciate it to have the space to share that actually. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard. Closure is a weird thing
Yeah.
because we think about what's the thing that would make us feel the best out of like this situation or whatever, and sometimes we're not going to get that, right? So then
Exactly.
how do we deal with that, and how do we cope with the fact that we don't get the kind of closure that we need in a certain situation? And that's difficult. That's not, there's things, I mean, so much of today we're talking about relationships. There's tons of closure I never received in so many relationships. But as far as death is concerned, that's something that is really different. I have no answers for that, and other than like, it is something that we all have. It is the shared experience for all of us, is the one thing that ties us all together. Is we will definitely die. Our earthly forms, our bodies, our physical bodies are going to die at some point, and then people around us have to deal with that as well. So I think a lot of that is just in the memory of a person, and that's part of, it's kind of, that's, to speak on a larger, weirder level, that's kind of part of why I'm an artist. I try to, I'm like deathly afraid of like kind of being forgotten. And my way to be remembered is to have these physical things that exist in the world way further past my death, So I enjoy being able to finish a painting, a physical painting, and putting that out there, and that being a thing that exists after me. So I don't, I'm not sure how other people view that. I don't know if other artists feel the same way or similar, but that's definitely, I think about that a lot. And that's part of like my fear of death, of dying and just being forgotten. And but I think then as living people, as people who are still here, that gives us kind of a job to make sure that we do remember the really important people in our lives.
I have a question comment.
Hi, Lydia.
Hi. So really good talk so far. Lots of deep things going on, but I wanted to ask you, in speaking of art and the art of dealing with life and life issues, what is your experience when you are painting about something that's important to you, like all of the love paintings that you did, your emotions about love? How much of painting those relieves you or acts as medicine, and how much of it rips open the wound, like
Yes
percentage
and
wise?
yes.
How much of it is healing?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's really good.
Feeling those feelings.
Yeah, and how much is just like picking at a scab?
I'm going to say it depends. It depends where I'm at, because I have a really weird association with my artwork in general. Like sometimes I don't want to look at a painting after it's done, mainly because I can pick out every single little mistake. But as far as the emotional aspect of it, most of that happens well before I've painted it, So like the idea, conception, and again, with talking with the models and having these conversations, and these very like real moments with them, we have this connection about a shared experience. And then, I'm painting them and I'm painting about their experience, but a lot of times that's mirrored back on myself. So by the time I actually get to the painting part of it, it's that part of the process for me becomes very technical. So it's not that emotional at that point. All the emotional shit has happened already, you know? So, but then my relationship to the painting is different than my relationship to the person that I'm painting. So then afterwards, if I have to sit and think about this thing, you know, I end up learning things about the paintings after they exist. Like this whole new series, I'm so interested to talk to people about their own experiences, you know, and because I feel like some of the statements and some of the titles are things that everyone has some kind of experience in. And so I just think that me working through some of those things, it happens in waves. Like it's not a thing that I'm just like, this is going to heal every one of my scars, you know, like it kind of happens as it happens. And I do feel some kind of like emotional burden taken off once I put this into words. And that's part of all of this whole idea of being vulnerable. And like, for me, that whole series is like my relationship history. It's crazy. So like, when you look at it and you read the titles, it's like, somebody just told me, they were like, oh, I loved your new series. It is so sad. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how else to be sometimes. I don't know. So you know, it's hard because I have a different association with the paintings because I'm a professional artist. I have to sell those things. So they are like it's a painting in the end to sell, to continue doing the thing that I'm doing, which is ripping me open emotionally. So like it's all feeding into itself. And so it's hard to say. Like it is definitely cathartic for me, and it is me working through the things, you know, and I do feel like I'm always searching for some kind of healing through all of that process. But it's not a linear path, you know? So I hope that was a good enough answer.
Yeah, and I also feel that they also act as almost prompts for people to talk about their own experience, which is exactly what you're doing with this talk. So it's almost like
a
less
master plan.
not so much art therapy, but more of a chance to address all sort of human issues that we can talk about then too.
Yeah. That's,
Oh,
you
I
know,
had something to actually interject, and my whole I guess round circle thing for this is that prior to knowing that you were having this show, Shane, and prior to all these pieces that came about, you and I had many discussions as you were leaving San Francisco about life, and you know, we were catching up, as well as this like delving deep into our sorrows or happinesses or whatever it was. We were just having deep conversations.
Yeah.
And in the moment,
which I appreciate, by the way.
Yeah, and I appreciated it too, because I was just like, wow, you know, partly we were talking earlier about how some people want to vent and they don't necessarily want to have like a back and forth discussion about it or anything like that. And I recognize that I have a lot of things going on, and so I have to curb my anxiety on pressure on my friends and family. You know, I tend to like be like, well, they probably don't want to hear about this right now, so I keep it in. And then there's that balance of like letting it go, as well as not burdening myself too much.
Yeah.
So then when we were having those discussions, I was realizing that like Shane was like really digging deep into conversation. I was like, wow, he gives a shit, you know? And I felt really stoked about like opening up fully. And then I started seeing the pieces coming in, and I was like, damn, yeah, I feel that. I was like, wow, I've been there too. I'm like, totally relate to that. And then as we're having this discussion, also all of the vulnerabilities that were entered and you guys were rating off, I'm given 100% of them I couldn't relate to, but I could relate to each one of them at least probably 80%. I had, you know, a lot of my own circumstances going on recently that I was like, wow, I could have been that person that entered that myself. Yeah. And so all in all, this has been like a huge experience of knowing that we're not alone in a lot of our vulnerabilities. And I really appreciate you for bringing that forth and having this conversation. And it's like,
I love
damn,
you
dude,
so much. I love you so much,
you and I were
Tanya.
just talking as friends, and here am I like participating, and then I'm like emotionally getting attached
Mhm.
to like the whole thing. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I so often feel really isolated, especially now. I mean, overall, I do, you know, and this is why I like connecting with people and having like these deep conversations and things, because it makes me feel like not alone, you know. And when you do read through those vulnerabilities, it really does make me not feel as alone. And it's not even like a comparison thing or anything like that. It's just like there's definitely people out there that feel very similarly. And that's kind of like my overall message pretty much all the time. You know, you listen to my podcast, you read, you look at the artwork. It's all about like just connecting with people over some of our life parallels, you know. And I feel like I've become so in tune with recognizing those things. And again, that's what I do with the artwork, is just like recognize those things that I connect with, and then putting it out in this visual form is pretty special, you know. So that's why I do what I do. And I
Thank
also love
you.
people, and I love
Thank you. We love
stories.
you.
Oh, thank you. um Anybody else?
I wanted to say with the feeling like you don't want to burden people with your pain or experiences. Um, I've heard so many people say that, and I'm definitely a receiver. Like I'm very receptive to that stuff, and I want people to be comfortable talking to me about these things because I I know that pain of holding and like being bottled and trying really hard to just do it by yourself and not let it get out of this under the surface. And I think that for sure there's moments when you'll show up to somebody and finally be like, okay, I just have to say this thing because it hurts a lot or it's uncomfortable or weird. And then they don't know how to receive it, and then it gets weird and it's uncomfortable, and you're disappointed and worried that you've ruined something maybe by showing up fully. But I think that what's more important, I don't know, more important, but I think it's important to try for the sake of getting it out of you and having those moments when you can let some part of you relax that's been trying to keep that held.
Yeah.
That practice is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the other great potential of the moments when the person that you've finally opened up to is actually receptive or can relate, and then you have
Yeah.
a moment where they see you and can also be seen because they're like, I've been doing that also, and I relate to that pain or that experience. And I think that that's a super important moment that a lot of people are starved of because we're all trying to be functional or proper or acceptable or palatable.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think then you know, the important part then is to find, it's hard, but to surround yourself with people who are ready to receive that sometimes. And it's difficult to find that. But this is why the vulnerability part, you being vulnerable, you know, you let it out in little waves and you feel people out, you know. And as long as it, you know, a lot of people, when they're really close to you, especially partners, romantic partners, like maybe unintentionally or intentionally, they like weaponize that vulnerability and they use it against you and they make you feel bad about it. um, so it's really hard to continue letting people in on the vulnerabilities that you hold in. So
another dance of self-worth and boundaries and
trust.
Yeah. Understanding that when you do that and somebody else comes back at you with wherever they're at with how much they're able to show up for others and for themselves is theirs and a product of their experiences, and not that because they're uncomfortable with whatever it is that you've expressed, that it means that you are the issue, or that what you're experiencing is wrong or something.
Yeah. It's really hard. It's like just the idea of trusting somebody with your vulnerabilities, and that backfiring how many times in our lives. There's so many times where I'm just like, this is all my thoughts and things and fears and problems and stuff, because this person cares about me. So why would they hurt me, with those vulnerabilities? And then they end up like backfiring on you, and you're like, well, shouldn't have opened up again. I opened up again and people continue to hurt me. So it's hard, but I feel like we need to figure out how to cope with the fact that other people are people too. They're just humans just like us. They're floating around in this weird fucking existence, and we're all just here being weird and awkward and things not being completely perfect, so they're also dealing with their own things. So it's hard, and it's hard to find those people, and even the people that are the right people to let in also might hurt you too, and they probably will, at some point, because we're not perfect. And so it's a delicate balance to figure out who to let in, who not to. I'm like there's the whole thing with oversharing. I'm kind of like an oversharer. I feel like my life is so public all the time. So I'm okay with that, because I feel like I have the tools to kind of deal with that now at this point in my life, with me not receiving the same thing back, or getting hurt in the process, because I've dealt with it, and it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt when it happens. It just means that I've learned how to kind of deal with that in my own life, and I'm still learning, So thank you for sharing that, Rhian.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Any other comments or questions?
You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much for participating. Everybody that I didn't get a chance to say hello to, hello. How are you guys? Thank you so much for showing up. This is recorded, so I will be able to put this out so you can refer people back to this talk, because I think it's really important that we discuss some of these things. Jennifer, thank you so much for going on this weird, wonderful ride with me. Jennifer is just somebody who just decided she wanted to do this with me. I asked her and she said yes. So this is somebody who, please go check out Jennifer's blog. It's jenvasquez.com. I've linked it everywhere on all the social media. So yeah. And so if you're into dark art events and goth stuff and vampire fangs.
Yeah, vampire, all sorts of macabre, if you like the macabre.
You can check out her blog. And if you guys want to see the artwork again, check out darkartemporium.com. And if you want to hear more from me, my flapping jaw, trying to fix problems all the time, you can tune into the Drawing from Experience podcast. And I talk a lot on there about very vulnerable things all the damn time. So check it out. Thank you guys.
I know. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate your presence tonight.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I will talk to everybody later. Cheers.
Thank you.
The other
Thank
side.
you so much.
Bye, everyone.